Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dan Lanning, the Oregon Ducks, taking care of business at home Friday night. Dale, 9 o'clock Eastern time kick should be illegal. Just been putting the boys through the ringer with some of these late night instant reactions. But I always say this: I wouldn't want to spend my Friday night any other way. Dill, I don't think Oregon played their best football game, and they still won 31-10. And those 10 points kind of came in pseudo garbage time for Michigan State. My biggest takeaways from this football game were you finally saw Oregon run the football like we expected them to run the football to start the 2024 season. But I think the biggest storyline is how good this defensive line is. And Dill, we just saw Michigan State play Ohio State a week ago. I think Oregon looked like the better team along the trenches against Michigan State than Ohio State did. Want to get into some other takeaways we had from this football game. Now, before we do, and as always, to the Oregon fans, can't thank you guys enough for all the support. Y'all know this is a program the boys love talking about. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, let it fly in the comment section. Some takeaways, whether there's some positive takeaways, whether there's some negative takeaways, stuff that you want to see Oregon clean up heading into a monster game next weekend, Dill. I kind of know where I want to start here, and that's the defensive line. Derek Harmon, Jordan Burch. I thought Mateo Yu probably had his best game of the season as well. You're starting to see this defensive line, Dill. What was the biggest question mark we had about Oregon in terms of what needs to happen for this team to be a true national championship caliber team? It was game wreckers on the defensive line. You saw that in troves. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but you saw that in a big time way Friday night against Michigan State here.
And I thought the big thing is guys were winning clean. I feel like even last year, you go back, like, yeah, they were putting pressure on quarterbacks. They were collapsing pockets at a relatively decent level. But again, you look, Mateo, you winning clean a fair amount. Jordan Birch winning clean, obviously on the inside. Caldwell in
Hey,
harm.
Caldwell, I thought played his best game of the season too. Like you could say Derek Carmen's kind of been dominating all season, but for guys like Jamari Caldwell, Mateo Yu, Jordan Burch has been really good all season too. But those guys played some of their best games of the season. Mateo Yu's figuring it out. Like last year, going back to his true freshman year, you could just tell he was a physical specimen. Like there's a reason his top 50 national prospect coming out of high school didn't necessarily have a ton of like pass rush moves in his toolkit. You're starting to see him go to a lot of different things. You saw him win on the outside shoulder a few times. You saw him win with some speed to power. It's nice to see Mateo Yu. We know he's a freak physically, but now he's starting to put it together from a mental side of things coming off the edge here.
And again, it's about getting those sack numbers up, and that was the type of ways they were winning a little bit more consistently. It was quicker, it was getting clean, it was getting back there and making a lot of negative plays. I feel like that's what put them in really good spots to make Aaron Child's night really, really long, and they did a really good job doing that.
And you talk about, I know this is early, but you talk about looking ahead to next Saturday. Like, where does Oregon potentially win this football game? It's along the line of scrimmage. Specific. I mean, where's Ohio State probably have the biggest question mark? It's probably on the offensive line. If you can win, not only getting after the passer, but also stopping the run like they have been doing, and you can get Ohio State into some of those third and long situations, like that is by far the biggest key for Oregon on defense. You saw what it needs to look like for Oregon Friday night against Michigan State. Another comment I had, I think the depth looks really good too. Like Amari Washington, I would be banging the table for him to play more if you didn't have Jamari Caldwell and Derek Carmen. It's hard to take those two bodies off the field, but I thought Amari Washington gave you some good reps too. Really, really impressed with the defensive line. Now, we'll come back to the defense, but I want to go to the offense. We'll talk about Dylan Gabriel, but I first want to start with this Oregon rushing attack, especially in the first half. Extremely impressive, specifically going to some of those outside zone concepts where you're letting Jordan James kind of pick and choose when he wants to put his foot in the ground and get uphill. I thought this was by far Jordan James' best season. I wasn't critical of Jordan James, but I said I think he can run the football a little bit better. I don't know if he's listening to the boys, probably not. That being said, I thought Jordan James looked by far the best we've seen him look. But that offensive line, once they've made that change, kicking Poncho back into center, Nishad at guard, I think Oregon's found their best starting five offensive line. They look phenomenal running the football here.
And the big thing is they kept him clean to the second level, and you can
Yes.
see when he gets a full head of steam,
Yeah.
he can run powerfully, he can run behind his pads, he can make guys miss in short areas and not slow down a whole lot. Like he's a really dynamic running back. Again, like yeah, their rushing attack hadn't quite hit its stride, but a lot of that was their offensive line. They just didn't seem like they were on the same page consistently. They weren't getting up to linebackers and picking them up. They were letting guys run free. Today, I think for the most part, you saw them, and they even went to some other concepts, a fair amount of pin and pull, that type of stuff. It was kind of interesting. I think their run game did look a little bit more creative, I'd say, in general, as they were hitting more schemes, more different kind of
Yeah.
looks for defenses, and it was obviously working because they were doing a
You
good job.
saw, I think Will Stein and Dan Lanning get a little, they were kind of banging their head against the wall in the second half run. They were just running power because I don't think they ran power as good as they wanted in the first half. So like, we're gonna run damn power. We're gonna get it right in the second half. They found how they want to run the football. Again, running that outside zone concept, you want to have guys that can move bodies, but you also have to have guys that can move in space and get to the second level. Look, Oregon has that kind of offensive line. Like they're big bodies, but they're also really, really good athletes. The offensive line's coming together not only in the run game, Dale. Pass protection's been elite, and it was a problem the first two games of the season. Again, they were trying to figure out what their best starting five is. They've done that. But what stands out to me and something that the Oregon fans know I've been critical of was they just weren't picking up blitzes and stunts in games very well the first two games. Like we kind of knew it wasn't the offensive line from a talent standpoint not being good. Like they got multiple guys that will be playing on Sundays in 8 months, but it was just the communication, the chemistry. Like you could see Joe Rossi and Jonathan Smith trying to dial up and get a little creative with the pass rush. Oregon, they were kind of money in terms of picking up blitzes and stunts. I thought that was something that stood out to me as well.
And you saw how comfortable Dylan Gabriel looked doing it. That was the game that I felt like, again, when he had his time to pick through that, and him and Tess Johnson, they get to work. I mean, it's really, really hard to deal with them. And they were getting to that a lot. They were getting him on his matchups, and they gave them time to let those routes kind of set themselves up. And that is kind of vintage more what Oregon looked like last year. I felt like the ball, it was really rhythmic. They were getting guys wide open underneath, especially, and letting them go to work after.
Yeah, well, they do such a great. And again, I haven't been, but it's like this offense goes through Tess Johnson, the passing attack, and rightfully so. Like Tess Johnson is just so fun to watch. Till I saw a tweet. Talk about moving Tess Johnson all over the football field, finding your matchup. Someone tweeted out, watching Cal Halliday, who was number 27 for Michigan State, that weak side linebacker. Watching Cal Halliday guard Tess Johnson is like watching my 70-year-old dad chase my 8-year-old son around. It was so good. Kind of made sense though. Like Tess Johnson, when you can get him matched up in space with a linebacker, it's barbecue chicken. All right, let's get to the not so good stuff on offense. The two red zone. I mean, Oregon punted the first possession. They didn't punt a single time until the possession Dante Moore came in. This Oregon team, they were doing what they wanted for the most part. And again, lack of penalties, no negative plays, like keeping this Oregon offense on schedule. You look at the numbers on third down, 6 of 12, very good, 50%. It's because Oregon is doing a phenomenal job staying on schedule. Look, is it frustrating that Dylan Gabriel turned the football over twice in the red zone? Yeah, absolutely. Am I panicking about Dylan Gabriel doing that? No. Like the announcer said it right. Like this kid does not make many bad decisions. He made two. One was just kind of late to Herbert over the middle, again, trying to force something in the red zone to Tez. Again, that was a small window, and weren't perfect with your ball placement. And when you go into a small window and you're not perfect, sometimes you can get burned. I'm not too worried about the red. Well, Dill, we can have this conversation. How much of a fan are you with this heavy set in the red zone? Because I don't necessarily love it because I don't feel like it's leaning into the skill set that Oregon has. Like I want Tess Johnson running those sprint outs. I want Terrence Ferguson on the football field in the red zone. I get Oregon wants to lean on the line of scrimmage play, but I don't feel like that's their best personnel group when they get inside the five.
When you have as many weapons as Oregon
Yeah.
has, I
Yeah.
don't see why you're running defensive guys on the field, why you're
Yes.
going to the extra offensive line. And yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe you could overpower certain teams, but I think they're so hard to guard for the most part. because they have a lot of weapons to throw at you. I don't think that magically changes in the red zone. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't see why you're running Tatum, Tuioti, or a guy like that onto the field, because he's just not the weapon Terrence Ferguson is. I don't totally see what he adds into that formation versus what either of the three tight ends would
Although
say.
I do like seeing Amari Washington on the field sometimes. It gets me excited. Again,
It
I
gets
just
me
don't.
excited, but
Yeah,
it's like, what is he going to carry
but
the ball? No, and I don't
es-
want him to. I don't like seeing defensive guys carry the football when you're a very deep offensive team.
well, they have him mostly in the block, but like my take on that is one thing that I had in my notes that we didn't touch on. The tight end and perimeter blocking is elite. Like I think these tight ends are just blocking their tails off. Even a guy like Kenny Sadiq, who's not a guy that we kind of know for his blocking, like he's taken a massive stride in terms of what he can do in the run blocking department. So if your tight ends were such a liability in run blocking, okay, maybe I get running Amari Washington on the field, but I'm kind of with you with all the weapons they have. I don't know if I love Oregon. It could be a little bit kind of like Monday morning quarterback, like it didn't work, so maybe I'm being critical of it.
Well, I'm generically anti-defensive players on the offensive side of the ball. I
You hate
don't
fun.
totally get it. It's like they're
Yeah.
not built, they don't practice doing it that much. And again, when you're Oregon and it's not like you have a lack of
Yeah.
guys on the offense side of the ball who can make things happen, and I just don't get it.
Hey, I'm all for a little defensive lineman touchdown, but I'm kind of right with you. Not maybe they're just trying to again. You kind of had this game. This was really never a doubt. Like I don't mind Oregon maybe playing around with some concepts, but you got to be scoring touchdowns in the red zone against Ohio State. I want to see them get to their best stuff. Um, what other conversation you haven't been on when we've had this conversation? I've had it with some Oregon fans in the comment section. I would love to hear from the Oregon fans about this. Do you feel like this offense is too reliant on Tess Johnson?
No, because honestly, it's not like they're forcing him to the ball. We're forcing the ball into him when he's not open. I think they're
Yeah.
doing a good job stretching the field. I mean, Trayshawn Holden's getting his touches. Obviously, Evan Stewart gets his touchdown on the field, and that really, really good throw would have been a really, really good catch. You certainly want to see Evan Stewart come down
Yeah.
with it, but I still think you saw him double covered down the field. I mean, at the end of the day, they are using those weapons. It's not like they're refusing to go to him. It's just Tez Johnson's really, really open very consistently.
And they like when Dylan throws to Tez Johnson, it's like an 85% completion percentage. He has like 30 first down catches on the year. Like it's like good things are happening when Tez Johnson's going to getting the football. So uh, am I do I there's going to be a time, I guess you'd say, if Oregon's making a run to the national championship, making a run to the college football playoffs where other guys will have to step up. Like I'm fully confident in it. You know what I mean? Like I'm confident that you can have an Evan Stewart game. Like, hey, Tez Johnson got taken away. Defensive coordinator schemed it up really well. I'm very confident Evan Stewart can make the plays. I'm
But
very
I
confident.
also don't think they're getting like defenses playing them almost to stop Tez Johnson exclusively. It's not like
Yes,
you're seeing
we
a ton
haven't
of
seen
single
that.
high safety or a ton of like no safety with like a robber in the middle. You're not seeing that type of defense. And frankly, until you do, he's really, really hard to deal with if you're not really keying in. Because at the end of the day, I don't think there's a guy in the country at whether it's nickelback, whether it's linebacker, whether it's safety who can just one-on-one deal with him. He's just too good.
Yeah, no, I get that, and it's maybe more just like my preconception that like I just love Evan Stewart. Like I think he's such a good football player. But it's really, I mean, again, we're being critical of Oregon. They punted one time with their first team offense. Like this
You're being
offense,
critical of Oregon.
this
I don't agree.
this this could have been a 45-10, 45-3 game. Dill, going back to the defensive side of football. So we talked about the defensive line dominating. Bryce Patrick just continuing to be an absolute dude for Oregon. And I'll be like, I didn't see that on my bingo card. Like I was like Jeff Bossa, Justin Jacobs, and then Devin Jackson as potentially that dark horse. Bryce Petcher is going to be a guy because he's so good at everything. Like he's fitting the run exceptionally well. He's not missing tackles. He's playing in space exceptionally well, using those center field instincts and coverage. I love what Bryce Petcher's doing. Having Jeff Bossa back's huge. Like you can tell his presence, not necessarily in terms of how he played. Like he wasn't that noticeable when he was on the football field. Obviously dealing with some injuries, but getting everyone aligned. Like you can tell he is the leader of that defense. And then Dylan, the secondary, like get your popcorn. Like you're going to see one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, Ohio State. I truly think this is one of the better secondaries that we see in Oregon. It's going to be a great matchup. Michigan State was able to hit a few big plays. Like the first drive that Michigan State had, like Jabbar Muhammad, okay, got fooled a little bit with play action. Really good recovery. True freshman Nick Marsh makes a really good play. Like you can live with that. The throwing windows against this Oregon secondary are pretty much non-existent right now.
Yeah, and it's tight, and they're again. You knew when you bring a guy like Jabbar Muhammad in, you
He's
free up a
such a
lot of
yeah,
other guys in the
yeah,
secondary to be able to do other things because there's not many cornerbacks you're more comfortable leaving out there
yeah.
on an island than him, and he's especially given he really kind of wants to play man coverage. It's like you see some guys who are good cornerbacks, but are even at times more comfortable in zone and getting there or having their eyes on the backfield and being able to take the football away. I mean, Jabbar Muhammad pretty much seems to be a pure man cover guy, really likes doing it, really wants to do it, and is really good at it. And I think that frees up. Again, Oregon didn't have that last year at the end of the day. Like they had good secondary players, but they didn't have that great one. Now they have that great one. They're still really talented around them. And I think you're seeing the fruits of that. Like teams just can't really throw on them that easy.
Yeah, having that true cornerback one is such a massive privilege. We got 12:41 Eastern time for the boys. We'll sign out. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. To the Oregon fans, all the support y'all continue to show means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.